Today's Nonsense Wars train thing features my newly built 1:48 scale Santa Cruz Big Trees and Pacific Railway CF7. In the 1970s, the Santa Fe rebuilt 233 EMD F7s into CF7s by replacing the streamlined body with a general-purpose design. The SCBT&P, an 8-mile-long tourist line in Northern California, operates two CF7s with vintage and converted passenger cars on its beach train between Santa Cruz and Felton. I built the CF7 for a Baylug collaborative display debuting in 2023. As such, it has to operate on 9-volt track, which is both a blessing and a curse. I didn't need to mess with battery boxes or geared drivetrains, but I did need to build around the bulky form factor of the official train motors. When I used these in the past, I had not found a good way to attach brick-built frames and subsequently had used the ugly and inaccurate stock frames more often than not. I generally prefer to design everything from scratch, and I very rarely look at prior work, but I felt pretty stumped on the frame problem, and I wanted to see a good solution. I discovered a brick model railroader design that represents the same type of bogie and that actually looks pretty good. I tried to build one out, but I found it too fragile for my taste, and I went back to trying to roll my own. The train motor and frames actually have some pretty unique geometry. The long pin lets the bogie pitch and yaw, keeping the wheels seated on bumpy track. Furthermore, the chamfered edges on the various tiled surfaces prevent them from clipping on rubbing surfaces. I can't replicate the relevant geometry with more conventional parts, but I had enough clearance to add a plate of separation everywhere but around the pin. I still had to figure out how to build something around the wheels, and I eventually settled on the 1x1 round plate with bar. The brick-built frames clip onto the rods, and I think this setup looks pretty good overall. Unfortunately, structural integrity still leaves something to be desired, since the rounds themselves still hang from tiles. I don't know how well these will actually hold up, but if they do well, I might retrofit some other models. Looking at some of the other construction techniques, the steps on the bogies use partly tiled plates rather than the usual panels. Implementing a half stud offset for the middle step while accommodating the studs forward or backward cow catchers took quite a few iterations, and they could also still use some additional support. The ends of the body also require some snot acrobatics. All of the sloped faces connect to 1x2x1 hinge bricks, but the hinges in the rear sit less than a stud apart, and the plate in the center sneaks through on rods. The short hood has a less aggressive slope, smaller gaps between the panels, and fewer construction shenanigans. All of the faces connect to the not necessarily easily removable sides. The sides themselves change stud orientation for the various grills, and the 1x2x1 profile brick in dark red cost way more than I would have liked. The cab roof comes off in order to seat a minifig. I typically would not accommodate one, but I felt it appropriate for a club display. The roof itself has some odd bracketing to support the slightly oversized headlight assembly. I could not find a more compact way to stack the two headlights. While I designed the CF7 to primarily use 9-volt motors, I also made some affordances for other drivetrains. The roof of the long hood comes off easily to reveal a 4-wide space for battery boxes and potentially other electronics. Practically, the lack of place for a receiver means powered up rather than power functions, but perhaps with some modification, something might fit in the cab. That being said, all the footage in this video shows the CF7 running on a single PU train motor paired with a dummy bogie. I'll bet not always full speed. Performance in this configuration, of course, suffers. The locomotive can move relatively quickly, but it can't pull more than a couple cars, and only at half throttle or more. 9-volt footage should come in the future, but on that note, this is the end of the video. Please consider subscribing if you like what we do, and have a nice day.
Yeah, so the new train motor also has a catalog one, so you should control it. And so an interesting challenge, I think, would be to get a build